Hi everyone, welcome. We're now ready to begin our webinar, Leading Teams Through Change. I'm Virginia with Rutgers Executive and Professional Education, and I'll be your host and moderator. We at Rutgers EPE are proud to sponsor today's webinar, and we're very happy to include this topic into our webinar series. Our webinar series highlights issues and topics in human resources, leadership, and management. We have allotted 30 minutes for today's webinar. We encourage everybody to communicate with us and to ask any questions that you may have. To do this, you can see the picture here. You'll click the orange arrow. This opens and closes your controls, and you can type in any questions or comments into the questions box and press send throughout the presentation. We will respond to all questions at the end of the presentation. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you by email by early next week. It's now my pleasure to introduce our instructor, Terry Seaman. Terry is a learning and organization development professional. His strengths include training and organization development, coaching and facilitation, leadership and management, and change and transition. Terry, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. Today, the competitive business world that we are all in is characterized by one word, and that is change. All of my clients that I talk to on a regular basis talk to me about how much change is going on that they're doing their best to respond to. And so really today's business's success depends upon the ability of the folks in that organization to change. And the single most important factor, in our opinion, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Rutgers Executive and Professional Education Group here, is really the capability of leaders. Can the leaders in the organization lead change? Can they support the people that are going through the change and that they're depending upon to achieve the goals of the change? And can the leaders support the adaptability and flexibility of their people, especially those most directly affected by what's going to change? Notice the image on the slide, folks, from the United States Marine Corps, where it says adapt, improvise, overcome. That is a very nice little model for what all of us have to develop within ourselves if we are going to have a prayer of dealing with the whitewater change that our lives are characterized by today. So our objectives for this webinar are shown here. We'll touch on why organizational change is so difficult. We'll look at the leader's role, in particular, three particular aspects of the role. Number one, that leaders are often the catalyst driving the change, that leaders must communicate so that people know what's going on and they build trust. And leaders need to develop their coaching capabilities to help people to cope with the impact of change on their work lives. So one of the questions I always ask when I'm teaching change in my seminars is, who likes change? I know you're all thinking how you would answer that, and the reason that I have the picture of the baby in the bathtub is that it's a little bit of humor that I like to use in my training. So the answer to the question, who likes change, is a baby with a wet diaper. Outside of that, most of us would rather not have as much change coming at us as we experience in our work lives. It's really a new world now, this unending, unrelenting lifestyle of change that organizations are experiencing. Some have adopted the term VUCA, V-U-C-A, which actually comes from the American War College, and the letters stand for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And more companies are saying, yes, that is what we are experiencing. And so to the extent that your company is entering a new VUCA world, it may seem to people in your organization like it's out of control. I was at a client's site recently talking to one of the managers there, she was telling me about the tremendous amount of change going on in her organization. I asked her, so how are you doing with all of that? And she said, oh, it's good, crazy good is what she said, crazy good. So change quite often is good. It's change for the better, but when there's so much of it, it can feel crazy, like it's out of control. Well, there's quite a bit of wisdom on change out there, and I thought I would start off with 3 points of view on change that I think are very, very important. Jack Welch was way ahead of his time when years ago he said, change before you have to. And now we live in an era where that statement has become quite prophetic. We are now in an era where we have to proactively change, sometimes on a daily basis, what we're doing so that we can keep up with the demands of our customers and our environments. But it's tough because, as the spiritual writer Richard Rohr said, real change, real significant change doesn't come easily. In fact, it always feels a little bit like dying, like we're losing something or giving something up, or there's an ending. And that then brings us to the third little bit of wisdom on change from the great change expert William Bridges, who said, there really is no change without transition. And what he means by that is that the change is kind of the easy part, moving from this system to that system, as an example. The transition is really where the difficulty and the challenge is, and that is getting people to let go of what they were familiar with, then make the journey to the new way of doing things, and then adopting the new way. And so that model, which is captured here in this image from William Bridges, really helps us to see more clearly the journey involved in transitioning to a new change within our organizations. And I think this model of William Bridges is one of the greatest gifts that any of the experts on change has given us to help us to see what it is that we're dealing with at that deeper human level in organizational change. So before going any further, we have our first of 2 polling questions. Jenny, you want to lead us through the poll?
Sure. Okay, we're going to launch a poll. You can see that it's on your screen. And the question is, how much is changing at your organization? So if you would just take a moment out, and if you can select one. And we'll give it another few seconds. And we're going to close the poll out now. And okay, Terry, so here are the results. 69% there is a lot of change going on, 31% moderate level of change, and no one chose not much change right now.
Isn't that interesting? You add up those 2 numbers, you pretty much get it's 100%, right? So so everybody's dealing with anything from moderate to a lot of change. So that's very much consistent with my experience and my travels and in talking with the organizations that come to the Rutgers programs that we run. Well, Charles Darwin is reported to have said this quote, although there is some controversy as to whether he actually said it or not. But whether he said this or something close to it, it's still a really good quote. And as you can see here, it's not the strongest that survives or the most intelligent that survives, but the one who is most adaptable to change. And so in today's environment, with numbers like that from our first polling question, we have got to increase our adaptability to change. It's really all about leadership in our view at Rutgers EPE. How we manage change, how we lead people through those transitions, really that's what it's all about. And if we develop those skills, then we can really boost productivity, we can reach our goals, and we can succeed as a business. And when we fail to really develop those skills and recognize the needs that people have during change, then what we're going to experience is the typical problems associated with change. Slowdowns, roadblocks, bottlenecks, negative attitudes, and it will defeat our efforts to make the changes that we have to make to remain competitive. Our second poll question now is going to ask you about how well equipped your leaders are. Jenny, would you lead us through this one, please?
Sure. Okay, you can see this poll question is also on your screen. So how well equipped are your organization's leaders to guide others through change? So if you could select one, we have well equipped, somewhat, not well equipped. Okay, we're going to close this poll out. And Terry, we have 15% well equipped, 65% somewhat, and 19% not well equipped.
Sounds like our work is cut out for us. Those numbers are not great news, but the good news is that Rutgers Executive and Professional Education is here to help all of you who are on this webinar today. So please, when we get to the end and Jenny tells you about some of the upcoming training, please make a note of that. So let's talk about leadership now in a little bit more detail and how leaders help their team through change. One of my favorite definitions of leadership comes from the great leadership writer Warren Bennis, who said that leadership is the capacity to turn vision into reality. And so this, I think, fits beautifully with change, because typically when we're making an organizational change, whether it's a new process, new system, a new acquisition, new product, new service, whatever it might be that we're rolling out and introducing, there usually is a vision, a strategy, a goal. And then the leader's role, whatever the level of the leader, is to make plans and help people to do the things they need to do to bring that vision into reality. So it brings us to the first of our three roles that leaders play, which is the role of catalyst. Leaders make change happen. It's really up to leaders at all levels, whether you are a leader in name or a leader by influence. You really can be a catalyst of change. The word catalyst, for those of you on the call that have a chemistry background, is a substance that accelerates a reaction. And now in the realm of sort of the human side of business, think of a catalyst as the person who is influential in energizing themselves and others toward change. So how do you make that happen? Well, in my field of organization development, we have something called the change formula. It was developed years ago by the names of the OD experts listed at the bottom of the slide. Many other people contributed to it, but these two individuals are the most closely associated with the formula. And the formula really, I think, is quite helpful, and it says that anytime you want to make a change, organizational change, you need to have a vision of what the change is all about. You need to also very clearly articulate the dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs and why we can't stay where we are and why we have to change. And you need a roadmap to get there, and you need the resources to accomplish the journey. And when those three elements, V, D, and R plus R, are sufficiently strong to overcome the inertia in organizations, called in this slide resistance to changing, then you have a chance of moving the needle and successfully accomplishing the change. For those of you that like pictures, and I'm actually a very visual person myself, I created this slide, so I'm not the world's greatest artist, but it's just a way of taking that change formula and looking at it as a picture. So the dissatisfaction with the current state, why we have to change, that drives us. Then we have a vision that we're moving toward. Our roadmap and our resources are how we're going to get there, but we recognize the obstacles that are going to be in our way. And so we have to factor those obstacles in, and sometimes those obstacles are within ourselves. And so I think the leader as catalyst uses tools like the change formula, develops change game plans, uses visuals and paints a picture for people so that as a leader you can establish a sense of where we're going, why we're going there, and help people to actually absorb and personalize that vision of change. Another very influential thinker in the area of leadership of change is John Kotter. And Kotter's 8 steps shown here on the slide, I think, are very, very useful in giving organizational leaders a sense of how do I lead myself and my team through a change? What are the things that I really need to do? I want to zero in on the 4th item down, communicate. communicate the vision, communicate the plan, communicate the why we're doing this. Communication is the second key role that leaders play, and it's a very important part of the John Kotter 8 steps toward change. And you really have to communicate, because during change, if leaders fail to communicate or don't communicate enough, the anxiety people in the organization are feeling is going to turn the rumor mill on. The rumor mill is going to go into overdrive and is going to fill in the gaps that people are experiencing, sometimes with good information, but sometimes with misinformation. So it's very important for leaders to really take charge of communication during change, and it's great that it's part of Kotter's approach. There's another approach to change from Margaret Wheatley, an organization development consultant. She's perhaps not nearly as widely known as Kotter, but I think that her principles for change are very, very good and really should be more widely known and studied and utilized. And you'll notice her third point down, conversation. Conversation is the way to engage people. And if you want to engage people, if you want to involve them in the change so that they buy into the change, then the key element, again, is communication. And for Wheatley, it's conversations. It's one-on-one conversations. It's team, work unit conversations. It's conversations across the organization. And really, the conversations are continuous. You want to really be talking about the change on a continuous daily basis so that people feel like they know what's happening, they have a voice, they're being heard, because as Wheatley says a little bit further down, the wisdom that is needed resides within the people that are part of the system. And so if the people in the system are involved, if they're engaged, if they're included, their voice is being heard, then that wisdom is going to be factored into the change, and the change is going to be successful. And the third role, catalyst, communicator, is change, or I'm sorry, is coaching. And so when we're in this transition to change from the old way to the new way, we really need to coach others through that. The model showing on the slide here, if you look at those first letters, ADKAR, it's the ADKAR model from the change management company ProSci. This is a very, very popular, widely used model. And to me, it's really a coaching model. It's a way of helping people through change. You want to help people through change because change really affects both our competence and our confidence. It affects our competence because we may have to do our work now in a new way, maybe with new rules, new processes, new systems, all of which has to be learned. And change affects our confidence. We were confident in the old way that we did things, but we won't be confident in the new way until we develop our skills and figure out what the new way of doing things really requires of us. And so all of that for me is talking about coaching, because when you come right down to it, what does a coach do? A coach really helps people to perform at their best. And so when things are changing, that change itself is going to affect people's morale, their confidence, their ability. And so helping them with all of that is one of the greatest things that a leader can do during change. So I'd like to just conclude my presentation portion of this webinar before we go to your questions with two more change quotes that I think are really good ones. You've probably seen these before. Gandhi once said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And so as leaders helping their teams through change, we have to lead by our example. You know, leading by your example is a key part of leadership. And so the question I'd really encourage you to ask yourself when you think about leading by example is, what example exactly do I want to lead by? What kind of example do I want to set? And so you want to think about your company's values, your personal values, and really be very mindful of your own example, because your people, they're normally looking at you, and you set the pace, you set the tone. But during change, they're really going to be looking at you to take their cue, because so much is now so up in the air, so uncertain. and so ambiguous. So be that change you want to see in your organization. And then the quote from Tolstoy, I think, is another good one, where he once said, everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. Well, change really, from a leadership standpoint, starts with you. Starts with the person that you see in the mirror every day when you start your day. So when you look at that person, you need to ask the question, what am I going to do today as catalyst, as communicator, and as coach to help my people move the ball down the field on the changes we are trying to implement at our company. So I would encourage you all participating in this webinar today to think about, one idea that has come up so far that registered the most with you. Make a plan to follow through on it, and give some thought to attending a seminar. The Rutgers Executive and Professional Education has quite a catalog of very, very excellent seminars. You're going to hear about a couple soon from Ginny. But think about your own development as a leader and invest in it, and you won't regret it, because it'll make you feel more capable, more confident. Your people will feel more capable and confident, and that's really what you want to do as a leader, is to grow the capability, even the leadership capability of the people that work for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Ginny at this point to see what questions may have come in.
Okay, great. Terry, thank you so much for that great presentation. I just want to remind everybody that if you do have questions, please feel free to type that into the question box. So Terry, we do have some questions coming in, and our first one is, what do you recommend when there is so much change going on inside a company that people and their performance are starting to be affected by it?
That's a good question. Change will definitely affect people. It will definitely affect performance, and it will definitely affect morale, especially if leaders themselves are overwhelmed by the change and they're not focusing on the things we just talked about. And so it's very, very important to really, as an organization, to recognize that change and transition are related and different. The change is how the organization wants to move from what we're doing today, the as-is state, to what we want to be doing in the future, the to-be state. So that's the change part of it. And the transition is how people are going to make that journey from the old way of doing things to the new way that we want to do things. And that journey itself is sort of an inner challenge and an inner struggle that people are going through. And change will generate a lot of me issues, me issues, where people will be thinking, what's going to happen to me? Will I be able to learn what I need to learn to be successful with this new system or new process? Will I have a job? Will I be happy here once everything has changed from the way that I knew it up until they announced this big change? And so it's very, very important to recognize that, yes, people, their performance, their motivation are all going to be affected by big organizational changes, and those things really have to be placed on the leader's dashboard. The leader has to recognize these things, focus in on them, and then very proactively play those three roles talked about today and more. We just included three things. There's many other aspects to the leader's role in helping people through change.
Okay, great. Our next question is have you seen much difference in change on a large scale versus small scale, such as smaller companies to larger global?
Well, I guess the main difference is that in a smaller company, there may not be quite the level of complexity as there would be in a larger company. But even in a smaller company, what might look less complicated to somebody coming out of a big company will still look very hairy to somebody in that small company, especially if they haven't gone through a lot of organizational change before in their career. So a lot of it is perspective, and the kinds of leadership impacts that we're talking about in this webinar are definitely are needed in both smaller as well as mid-sized and large companies. So it really is required no matter what the size of the company.
Okay, great. Our next question is, what are your thoughts on leaders who are trying to make deadlines at the expense of quality?
That's not a good thing. My initial reaction to that is that's not a good thing. But that's the reality, right, in a lot of organizations. It's almost like some have said in the past that that organizational change is like changing the engine out on a 747 in flight. You know, how do you do all of that at once without the plane crashing? It's a very, very difficult thing. And I think organizations need to recognize that these things need to be balanced. The urgencies of the day-to-day, such as meeting deadlines, meeting customer shipments, that those things have to happen at the same time as you're changing your processes or your systems. And so that, to me, is just further evidence that these issues we're talking about today really need focus, really need thinking, and really need support in organizations that are launching into change initiatives.
Thank you. Okay, we're only going to take one more question. Time is closing in, but if we have not answered your question, we will funnel your question to Terry and email you Terry's response. So our last question right now is, what course of action do you recommend for engaging leadership to pursue educational opportunities to strengthen change management leadership?
You should definitely get in touch with Rutgers. I know that that I'm very biased in that regard, but we've been around. We, the executive and professional education arm of the School of Management and Labor Relations, we've been around for a good long time. We are filled with expertise. Our faculty is world class. We have a great deal of know-how, a great deal of experience. Please utilize us, get us to help you, get us to be a resource to you and to your organization. And really, I would strongly encourage you as an organization to invest in your leadership development. Leadership development is so very important. Leadership development itself is a very broad thing, but within leadership development, if your organization is going through change or planning to go through change, certainly get your leaders into a managing change course, either one of our public courses or, even better, an on-site course, which we would be happy to come and bring to your location and customize to meet your business's needs.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that's the end of our question and answer. We just have some closing notes. What's our next slide, Terry? So this webinar has been approved for 1 business certification credit through HRCI and 0.5 professional development credit through SHRM. Please contact me. You all have my contact information, and I can provide you with the codes to get that credit. And what's our next slide? And we want to thank everybody, as always, for attending the webinar and for your participation. So we would like to extend a 20% discount on our fall offerings. You could see we offer an array of programs in human resource management, leadership development, management development, and project management. So please go to our website, epe.rutgers.edu, and you can use our discount code webinar 062216 for the 20% discount. And then for more research on today's topic, Terry will be instructing in our Essential Management Skills Certificate Program, Engaging Today's Workforce Through Innovation and Change, and that's on November 15th. And please save the date. Our next webinar is July 28th. We're very excited about this one. This is HR Goes Mobile, so you will be receiving some communication on this webinar as well. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you, Terry, again, and thank you all once again for participating. As I mentioned, a link to the archive recording will be sent to you via email so you can review that. And we hope to see you at our future webinars and also this fall in our future workshops. And all our fall dates are listed, and once again, our website is epe.rutgers.edu. Thank you.